In this video, we're going to talk about different opportunities, how you can finance a loan. We will distinguish between home ownership and rented apartments, especially in respect to tax benefits. And I will also explain what's my favorable financing option for different scenarios. So let's get started. On the left hand, we see first of all home ownership, and on the right hand side, we see rented flats. So let's start with home ownership. Typically, you say you need 10% at least for buying tax, notary fee, and possibly a property agent. Depends on the state in Germany. Might be less, might be more, on average 10%. I typically recommend that you have another 10% for the down payment. So this is real money that goes to the bank, so you only take 90% mortgage of the purchase price. Why? Typically 10% is, for most banks, the sweet spot where you receive the best mortgage conditions. If you invest, let's say 15 or 20%, it typically doesn't change the interest rate much, so it doesn't make sense to put more money to the bank. Some banks say 5%, 7.6, 8, 9, 10. It obviously depends on the bank. Also an average number. If we talk about rented flats, I would recommend to invest a maximum of 10% for buying tax, notary fee, etc. Might be even the case that we say you invest 0% and you take 110% loan. So 100% for the purchase price actually, and 10% for the buying tax, notary fee, etc. Why? If you buy something for home ownership, you have no tax deduction. So no tax benefits at all. If you buy something and you rent it out, the interest rate is fully tax deductible. So if you have a gross interest rate of 4%, you also have obviously 4% interest rate here. But now this is entirely tax deductible, so 42% tax benefit, which means your net interest after taxes would be something around 2.3 something. Okay? So if the bank is giving you money for 2%, but you gain at least 6% on the stock market, why should you give more money to the bank? So it's really important when you look at the mortgage to understand, okay, is it home ownership? Is it a rented flat? And especially what makes more sense, especially after taxes. Okay? This is, let's say, the normal recommendation. Let's say you buy your second apartment. So you have the second flat. What is recommended here? If we look at the interest rate, we always have, in the mortgage, we always have the interest rate, so let's say 4%, and the amortization rate of, let's say 2%. Amortization rate is Tilgung in German, so the repayment rate of the loan. So in the end, you have 6%. So if you have, for the second flat, 4% interest, you rent it out, so also tax deductible, so still 2.3 something net interest rate. What you now can do, typically from the second apartment onwards, that you don't pay the 2% back to the bank, that you invest the 2% in the stock market. You invest the 2% here, which gives you 6 to 9% on average. And now you finish the loan with a lump sum, let's say after 15 years, 18 years, 22 years, depends on how fast you would like to repay the loan. This saves you on average, depends on the interest rate, 3 to 5 years. So you're 3 to 5 years faster finishing the mortgage with the same amount you contribute yourself, just by investing that money. Because if you just give the money to the bank, you don't have real benefits. In the end, they take your money and invest it. Okay, so we behave like a bank. This is one thing. Now let's talk about the duration of the loan. If we have 4% interest rate right now, or 3.5, you name it. If we have 4% interest rates and you have a big mortgage of, let's say, 500,000, then you might want to have some security if the interest rate increases in the future. You would like to be finished with the mortgage at a certain time. So here it might make sense to have a long duration of, let's say, 15 to 25 years until the mortgage is actually finished. Then you have the security, because we're talking about a high interest rate or a possible higher interest rate in the future, and you would like to be on the safe side. Okay, this would be one option for home ownership. Second option is you say, well, right now I have 4%, still 500,000 loan, but the interest rate is pretty high. I assume that the interest rate is becoming lower in the future. Then it might make sense to only finance for 10 years. It obviously depends on your risk appetite. Are you assuming or hoping that the interest rate is falling? So in that scenario, it would be advantageous to use second option. Or do you say, well, I have 4%, it fits my monthly situation. I'm more scared about 5, 6, 7% in the future, which might cause issues. Who knows over the next 15, 20, 25 years. Okay? If you have a low interest rate, so let's say scenario 3, the interest rates are coming down in the next years, and then you finance your mortgage and you have 2% interest rate, then I would definitely recommend to use this solution here. So you're definitely on the safe side, you have peace of mind, and you can plan properly. This is for home ownership. Let's say you buy something and you rent it out. Same example, slightly different. You only buy something for 200 because you would like to have a small apartment to have the biggest target audience for possible tenants. So it doesn't actually make sense to buy bigger apartments, which are also more expensive typically. So you have 200,000 mortgage in comparison to 500,000. And here I always recommend to only have 10 years. Why? Interest rate fully tax deductible. So we're talking about 2% net. If we have 6% in the future, still tax deductible, still cheaper than 4%. So should be fine. Why do I also recommend that? If you buy real estate and you rent it out, you can sell the property after 10 years fully tax-free. And you would like to have the option to possibly sell the apartment, because who knows how the future looks like. The problem is if you have an interest rate of and a duration of the mortgage of, let's say, 20 years, you have to pay a penalty fee if you exit the mortgage earlier, if you, for example, sell the apartment. So you would have a penalty fee here in that scenario. And if you would like to avoid that possible penalty fee, I would also recommend to have 10 years. Because the bank would say, well, we only earn 10 years interest. We planned with 20 years interest. So please pay us for 10 years the interest, because you sold the apartment earlier and we didn't earn as much money as expected. Okay, typically many banks don't charge the full 10 years of interest, but even if it's 7, 8 or 5 years, it's still a lot. So this is something I would definitely recommend if we talk about rented flats. Okay. On top of that, last topic, you typically have 5% unscheduled repayment, Sondertilgung, or special amortization. Okay. So every year you can put in another 5% of the mortgage as an unscheduled payment just to repay the loan faster. But I would also not do that, because who knows if the interest rate is lower in the future, so it's actually not necessary. And still, if you have 2 point something net interest, I wouldn't recommend the 5%. It might make sense, always depends on the interest, to finish the loan faster here if you have 4% compounding. Then it makes sense, but I guess I will record another video to explain that situation properly, in which scenarios you do the unscheduled payment and in which scenarios you invest the unscheduled repayment, just to get the most out of your situation. So if you're interested in buying real estate, or you would like to have support with real estate financing, feel free to reach out, visit our website. We are happy to help. Talk to you soon.